Welcome to IT Nation Wise Up, the podcast that skips the sales pitch and brings you real valuable insight to your business. Today, we have Tim Coach, one of my personal friends, one of Vicky's friends from the channel, and we are going to talk about, well, probably all sorts of things, but one of the things we're going to talk about is Tim's journey from someone who was on the technical ops side to the sales and growth side. It's a really cool story. I know we have some good insights coming up, and I'm looking forward to getting started.
Same. And I can't wait to hear how you two met. And before we dig into this episode, make sure that you are clicking subscribe to IT Nation Wise Up so you never miss an episode. Now, let's dig in, shall we?
So Tim, Vicky gave a teaser. You and I first met, and I think it was Zero Trust World a couple years ago, somewhere in Orlando. That's all I remember.
It was Zero Trust, and it was interesting. So I had not to give away the episode, but I had taken a job. It was really my first jump into this side of the world, and was representing that company. And we were at Zero Trust World, and we were having some conversations. And then this young man walks up to me, and he starts asking me some security questions, and for the most part, I'm like, buddy, I'm not just a pretty face. Like I've got a technical background. You want to go? Let's go. And so we kind of start going back and forth, and he obviously gets into some items that I just don't have the answer to. And my go-to response is always, you know what? I don't know that, but let me get back to you. Let me get your information. I'll get back to you. Right. And then actually get back with the person. That's a big thing. And then he started laughing, and he's like, oh, I'm coming to work for you guys for next week as part of your security team. And I'm like, oh, so he just came up to the booth to try to set me up to see if I knew the security responses to the software we were representing at the time.
That sounds about right.
But that's, if you think about it, that's a really good approach, especially if you're going to go to work for someone. That's a really good approach to go to their booth or when you see them and start asking questions, right? Because if the people that's in front of the mass don't understand the answers, right, or they don't know the answers, then there's already an opportunity built in to help make that presentation better, which is exactly what Matt did when he came on board. We had a few conversations, and he's like, here's some things you can say. And as someone who's kind of made their living as a face and a speaker, having someone like a Matt that corrects you when you're wrong, right, or gives you ways to say the widget correctly. Those are critical things for a speaker to have. You don't want to be those speakers that I know it all, don't talk to me. Like I love the security guys and the ops guys and even the sales guys having conversations with me about this is the way you want to say that because it's more technically accurate.
I don't mind admitting here in hindsight that does make sense. It was not that calculated. I just thought it would be funny.
See, this could have been your opportunity to take credit and be like, yeah, you're right. That was really smart of me to do.
In hindsight, it was. I just thought it was fun.
So, Tim, can we start off with talking a little bit about your experience in the IT industry? Would love to kind of hear that story. We know you as working on the vendor side of the MSP channel. Give us the dirt.
Yeah, so I'll try to cover kind of this weird chunk that ended me where I was. So I grew up in a very small town in Oklahoma. It was a dried up mining community, and the only way out was the military. So I went to the military, was in the military for several years. That's where I really kind of became process and procedure based, right? Like knowing the books, understanding manuals, how they work. And then I got out, and like as most veterans do, you tend to wonder for a few years trying to figure out what you're going to do. So the way
what branch of the military?
I was in the Army.
Okay, go Army. All right.
So when I went to school, I had a friend of mine. Like I already had a lake house and a boat. Like I was living my life. I was almost 30, right? So I had a friend of mine that was an accountant, and I was like, well, if that guy can do it, then I can obviously do it. Right. So I started taking the you're too dumb to be in college classes, and which is like the prerequisites when you've never been to college at that age to get into a college. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. People take like 4 or 5 years to do this. Like, I don't have that kind of time. So I found an accelerated college in Kansas City, moved up to Kansas City to go to that school, took about a half an accounting class and was like, this is not my jam. And talked to the school counselor, and they were like, what do you think about computers? And I'm like, well, I don't really know anything about them other than sending emails and whatever the deal is. And they started talking about it. And for me, I'm a very mechanical person. So, back at my age, you used to turn a key, right? And then the result you wanted was the wheels turned. And if that two things didn't happen, then there was very much a process to get you to the answer. So when I started looking at computers, that's how it related to me. So that's when I really decided to get into computers and ended up being an engineer by education, and then took my first job at a large firm that, a bunch of places throughout the US. So probably my cup of tea back in the day was like Cisco, right? So I was a Cisco programmer on multiple levels, but I also dealt in SQL and Citrix and VM farms and just very in-depth backgrounds. And then the MSP that I worked for at the time, or the MSP that I used at the time with my company, they just screwed something up, right? So I fired them. And the guy that ran the MSP was a friend of mine. He's like, well, if you're that hot, why don't you come over here and try to do that? So I was like, oh, okay. So I jumped over, and it took me about 2 days to realize I did not know what I was doing. And so the whole fake it till you make it. So anyways, over the course of about 2 decades, I learned what I was doing, and I ended up rebuilding a bunch of MSPs and then consulting with a bunch of MSPs. But I get bored, right? It's like I want to try something new and something different. I've got a background where you're in front of people all the time talking anyway, so that was kind of a norm. And then I'd been with Datto doing the Datto road shows for a minute. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. So was consulting or working for a company, and it just wasn't working out. And I was like, okay, well, I'm ready for something new, like how to refresh my career. And basically talk to everybody that we know, right, collectively as a group. And they're like, oh, yeah, you should absolutely jump over and do this. Like, you'll be great at it because of how much experience you have on the MSP side, and then as well as the client. So that's when I jumped over, which was the first place that Matt and I worked together. And then from there, it's just gone on. But I think the key to my success is I know the ins and outs. I know the zeros and ones, the intricacies of how they work, because I've done it all, right? I've lived through all that pain. And then on the other side of that, as I choose, and as I'm choosing now, as I go to the next opportunity, is I want to choose products that are impactful for MSPs. Right? Not just another widget, not just another, here's your security this, here's your AI that, here's whatever it is, but products that really bring something to them.
Okay. So it has to have a mission that really is
very much so.
the industry.
And I got to believe in it. It's like a lot of it is, would I use it? Right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of it, right? Because it makes it easy for me to have that conversation, because as we talked recently, we did some interview videos at CompTIA, and we were talking. My subject was content. Well, you got to be able to put what you're talking about in a way that the audience hears and receives it. And when we use these words that we make up on the industry side, and nobody really knows what those words mean, then is the audience receiving what we're talking about and having a passion behind the products you're doing? So, when Topper and I was together, there was no easy way to see cash flow in our industry. And MSPs are horrible at understanding cash flow, right? They all try to be, but there's just the work to go into seeing what your actual cash flow is just super labor intensive. And I mean, how many times do MSPs look at their bill and they're like, oh, wait a minute, we shut that thing off like 3 months ago and we're still paying for it. Right. So that first product really showed them their cash flow. What are you spending and what are you getting paid for? And then I jumped over to another company, and there it was about really taking the mundane out of their day right? And reducing those labor costs, because on the MSP side of it, when I look at the profitability to contract, labor is always your biggest cost. So for me, it was like, oh man, I know that. So, and I know that the more efficient I can make my labor, and that doesn't mean, grind my people into the dirt. It means how I make them efficient, the more profitable each and every contract will be, which makes the company more profitable, which allows you to do those things that set up for that next financial goal. So that's really kind of how I made that transition from, the starting out an engineer and actually beating the keyboard on a daily basis, programming or taking care of high-end systems, to being a public speaker and representing companies.
So can I be devil's advocate here? And Matt, I want to hear your thoughts on this too. It sounds like you've kind of dived in headfirst to these opportunities without really knowing the ins and outs, but then learning along the way. And for those out there that are maybe tuning in and are thinking, how do I make my leap to the next step in my career? I don't know everything yet. Like, how do you flip that mindset, I guess, from I have to know everything before I actually go out there and seek something first approach?
Yeah, I think from my end, it's funny because this conversation has come up quite a bit in the AWIT world as of late. And that's how we write and how we apply to jobs. Like, I know when I was an MSP and I was putting jobs out there, I wrote the job description at 100% of what I wanted in an individual. Well, for some people, and I knew going into it that I was only going to get 70 or 80, right? But some people see that and it just turns them off, right? Other people see that and they're like, I'll wing it. And they'll go ahead and apply. And a lot of times what we're looking for as employers is we're just looking for someone that's willing to, make that leap of faith and do that, right? And then we're not looking for 100% adherence to a job description or to the position, because a lot of times that position changes. So for me, it's having faith in yourself and your own process that you can make that leap and do a great job. If it's something that you look at it and it's like, man, I got 60% of this, and there's a couple of things that I'm going to have to fake it until I make it, I guarantee you more than likely have the knowledge to at least start down the right path. And then the best thing is if you got a great team around you, they'll help make you successful.
I think you nailed it there on the great team aspect, right? You guys were all aware of who the individual was when I made the jump to the vendor side. And, I believed in the people around this. Yes, it was new and scary and strange. But going to that, where Tim and I worked, I wasn't yet doing the public speaking too much. I would occasionally do something, but when I came here, that's when my role changed to be away from that hands-on keyboard person to actually being a public persona. And I had no idea what I was doing. If you were unfortunate enough to see some of my very first presentations, things were pretty rough.
Let's see if we can dig those up.
Yeah, please don't put them on the blooper reel. I knew I had the knowledge. I knew I wanted to make this jump, right? I think that was the key. I was ready to become that different kind of role, frankly, because I was tired of getting paged at 3 a.m. with like server down issues. And so I'd ask this to you, Tim. What was it like when you went on stage for the first time as someone on the vendor side or trying to present? For us engineering people, that's a tough thing if you're not used to it. And I know for me, the first couple, not so great. Then it became comfortable after a while. What was it like for you going through that?
So from what I gather, I tend to be the oddity here, right? Because I wasn't uncomfortable, and I am rarely uncomfortable, right? I mean, there's video out there of me singing on stage in front of a couple of thousand people on a main stage a year or so ago, right? As just going in, kind of having a laugh with the MC. But I was lucky even though I was in a really small school, right? I think that I graduated with like 18 people in my senior class.
Oh, wow.
Like,
that's tiny.
That is small.
So we had a theater and arts department, and my friends were in there. So I wanted to be there.
I thought you were going to say, hold on. I thought you were going to go into the story about how you were like an acting major in high school. And I was going to be like, that makes so much more sense.
No,
right?
No. Trust me. It's way more rudimentary than that as a 16, 17, 18-year-old young man. But my friends were there. And we had this professor, but he looked like, if you're old enough, he looked like Gargamel from the Smurfs. So we called him Uncle Gargamel. And this guy was like, he brought the program in. So like, I was on stage at 16, doing poetry and debate and comedy and all these other things. So that got access there. I was pretty successful in football, so there were some interviews there. That was kind of a regular thing. And then when you get in the military, in your early days, you don't really speak a lot publicly. But then as you gain rank, you're now constantly projecting your voice and you're constantly giving orders. So being in front of those people to do that all the time was a normal thing, right? And then when I moved back into the civilian world, I always seemed to be in some kind of a public environment where I had to speak. So for me, being on stage and speaking is not as difficult. Like, it's not as scary because I've done it so much, but it's having the right information. Like, nothing crushes me more than being on stage, giving the delivery of a presentation that I think is spot on. And then I'll walk off stage and somebody like Topper's like, you wasn't quite right here. Because that to me is that's my legitimacy, is I bring honesty, right? I bring the facts. And when I find out that I'm not delivering those facts, that's what's scary to me, because I feel like I'm not representing the company to the people correctly. And I'm also, I want to make sure that I'm always truthful with what I'm doing. So for me, the stage presence was natural. It's more about making sure that I'm technically accurate and delivering the solution or the presentation in a way that is in line with the company that I'm representing.
Let me ask it this way. Say, put yourself back in when we were working together, right? You didn't know, I didn't know at the time either that I'd end up doing this kind of role. What advice would you give Matt from whatever that was, 2 or 3 years ago? Matt, you're an engineer about to enter the public persona, public speaker realm. What advice would you have for that person, someone making that kind of transition?
Talk to your knowledge and your passion. Because if you're talking about something that you know, it naturally comes easier. If you're a tech person, right, and they want you to talk about, P&L, that doesn't come natural. So you got to do a lot of studying. It's not easy to do that. When you're first making that leap, speaking to things that you know about makes it a lot easier because you are the expert in the room.
The other thing I would add to that too is speaking about things that you are comfortable knowing when you get out there, but also you don't have to try to step into Tim Coach's shoes immediately and get out in front of 1,000+ people. You can start out really small. I mean, there are improv classes that you can take. I took Toastmasters, which is a U.S. national program. Actually, maybe international.
It is international because
it is international.
We had a gentleman that went to Toastmasters.
Okay, that's where I got my first stint in public speaking, was taking a Toastmasters class at ConnectWise, and it was really great because when you're not used to getting up in front of people, you learn improvisation skills, but then you also have structured speeches as well, which are both important skills to have, but very different in their approach. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah. So Vicky, we're doing table topics on the next podcast episode is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it now. What do you guys prefer, waffles or French toast? I'm just kidding.
I'm waffles, right? But I'm South. So. But I think
French
this form as well leads really well to learning your craft, right? This leads to comfortability because it's I mean, even if, like and we've all been on these video casts or these live streams where there's hundreds of people in the room, right? And the chat's going off on the right? But like, I'm having a conversation with Matt and Vicky, who are my friends, right? So the conversation isn't as formal, and I kind of learn like, oh, I lost my place, and where do I keep my place, right? Or I learn, like, I have a notepad up so I can take notes as I'm like, somebody spurs a thought, right? I mean, now when we're on stage, we tend to have the cheat board, which are the TVs that kind of keep us on track where we're going. Right. But I think these small, intimate, the live streams, the videos and stuff like that allow you to get comfortable with doing this in a much smaller group, even though it may be going to a larger area.
So question for you guys, because you both have come from the more technical, kind of the back end of working in the business to being kind of at the front end of the business and representing the business publicly. Would you ever go back the other way? Do you ever see that? People coming out of the public eye and going back into the back office?
You do see it. I would not unless it's the right opportunity. Like, in most of my opportunities nowadays are executive levels coming in the C-suite or sitting on boards and being investors, but it's not like going back to Matt said earlier, right? Like, I was out of the business for 6 months and my phone rang one morning at 4 a.m. and because it was a data center was down. And I just laughed and I'm like, let me give you the number to the person you want. If it's not me.
I think my answer is the same as Tim. I mean, certainly the door is not closed to doing a technical role or an ops role again, but it would really have to be the right fit at this point.
Yeah.
What about you, Vicky? You've been with ConnectWise for some time, right? I know there's opportunities in the MSP world for someone that has, your professional need to go over, especially with some of these bigger companies. Like, is that something that would interest you at all, is to take the jump from the vendor side over to technically the client side?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. It's interesting because when we all started working together at CompTIA, and that's how I met Tim. Actually, I met Tim in Vegas at ChannelCon last year. That was my first experience kind of getting to know each other. And if you've never met Tim in person, he's like this tall man, that stands out in a room with a booming voice. And I was like immediately drawn to him because I also get very excited when I meet people that have high energy levels. Like, I just kind of like, I can't help it. I like match it like until, your head explodes because you're just like, ah! Just, keep amping up the energy on both sides of the fence. But yeah, I probably would, maybe, potentially. But one of the things that I didn't really realize going into CompTIA and going into the advisory council side was I didn't really think I knew what I was talking about when I first joined our council. So Tim and I are on the Channel Development Council together at CompTIA. And over time, just like you were talking about, Tim, I've realized that, there are things that I actually know, things that I've done in business, building go-to-market strategies that can actually help people, vendors and MSPs in their approach. And what validates that even more outside of our council is actually having conversations with other peers in our community that have asked for my opinions or feedback on things, which also makes me think, okay, well, maybe I do know a thing or two. And that's always rewarding at the end of the day, helping others and seeing their progress maybe from things that they've learned from you.
You do. You were suffering from the classic imposter syndrome that all engineers deal with, right? Not realizing how much you actually do know about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is when you sit down in a room full of people and they start talking and you're like, should I be here? And then all of a sudden you're like, they're saying something and you're like, that's not right. What are you talking about? And then you gently phrase, right? You don't come out and say you're completely off the rocker here. you gently say, well, this has kind of been my experience and what I see in that. And then what you realize is as the room full of people are talking more and more and more, you know quite a bit about what the room is talking about. Right now, there's certainly that's a whole different thing than reading the room, right? And knowing the temperature of the room and where to speak and at the right point. But it's setting with a group of people that like you look around as your peers and colleagues and are like, okay, I know exactly the conversations we're having.
Yeah. Here's a good follow-up question then to that. What are some practices that listeners can leverage, right, to be able to have those aha moments that the three of us are talking about here? Like, okay, I do have the skills. How do you know that, right? What are some ways that you can create more of an awareness as to, being able to build those skills and understand them and to be able to articulate them to grow?
I think you just got to put yourself in the situation, right? That's the only way you know. Like, so at CompT is a perfect example, right? So the CDAC makes sense for me because I've got so much experience in that world, right? And then there's the AI Council, and they're like, do you want to be on the AI Council? And I'm like, well, I need to better understand the AI Council because although I understand it probably a little bit better than most because that was my job to understand it, right? And it's like, okay, are these like people really digging into the tech of AI, which I don't want to be in the tech anymore? Or are these people talking about how do we bring AI into the businesses to make it more efficient, which is what I care about? Because even though my undergrad is tech, my grad is managerial and that whole business sense. So I lean better to the business side than I do the tech side. So that's the reason why the CDAC made more sense than the AI. And I even know like the Security Council, like they get super in the weeds. And I just quite honestly don't have the attention span for that.
So I would say the biggest thing you can do to start going down that road and figuring out what you're good at is you just have to put yourself out there and try some. We were talking before, my first presentations, like they were a complete disaster. And you know what? The world didn't stop spinning. I've got on live streams that went south and my industry reputation was not trashed from one bad live stream, right? You got to be okay with that. And before long, you'll figure out the formats that work for you, the subjects, the topics that make sense for you. And it'll come naturally, right? There's no way to know what it's going to be until you get some reps in trying to find it.
But
yeah,
I come off stage sometime and in my head, I'm just like, that thing was a disaster. Like I didn't hit some key points. I stuttered. I didn't, whatever the deal was. Right. And then luckily, if you have good friends in the room, right, people that will give you honest feedback and not that, oh, it was a great job. Right. A lot of them don't even notice the flubs. So like, Matt, you're over there talking about, I'm sure these were disasters. But the reality of it is the room probably didn't read it the same way you did.
Yeah.
One of the things that I piece of advice that I heard on a podcast recently was when you do get that feedback from the room of, oh, you did a great job, or, it could have been better. It's digging in and asking, well, what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Like getting that actual tangible feedback that you can take back to really make your pitch better. And the other thing is, I think, Tim, what you were just mentioning, and Matt, you're mentioning, is like, don't be too hard on yourself.
Like, there's always things that you can do better. There's always things that you think, okay, well, I didn't hit the timing right. Or, you best get comfortable with telling a flat joke. I'm telling you that now. If you tell a joke on stage and it goes flat, like, it's just, you got to laugh at it. Right.
Can you give us an example, Tim? What's a joke that was flat?
I can't even probably tell you one now, but I know I've told them. And I had the boss that did this thing, so I'll do it every once in a while, just kind of recover the room, and I'll tell a joke, and it'll be flat, and I'll be like, "Hello, is this thing on?" And then that will usually pull them back out of it. But yeah, it's like, or sometimes you just keep glazing over it, like it didn't hit, but then the next one hits, right? Because there is a bit of entertainment value to what we're doing, right? It's not. You can't be boring, right? I can't even when I was an MSP and I used to sit in those rooms, like watching someone read a slide deck that's 80 freaking slides long, like No,
Yeah.
like I don't have to be here for that. And I'll just get up and leave the room now. Like I'm just like, no. If
Yeah,
I gotta
there's an
if I gotta
entertainment
watch you read
aspect.
your own slides, this is not the jam for me.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of technical people get lost or confused in that they get on stage and they're almost acting like they're in a college lecture hall delivering like course material, and it's not like that. You lose the audience, and I did that at first too, right? There's a learning curve to how to entertain and hold the attention of an audience, not just deliver information. And for us, at least for me, that was difficult, and I imagine anyone listening making that transition, you have to see yourself as an entertainer who's also delivering info, right? Not the person reading the Wikipedia article to you or reading the textbook chapter to you.
Right. And there's obviously things like so some of Matt's presentations are way more technical than my presentations will ever be. So there's certainly more data that needs to be there. But I know because I've seen him present, the thing that he doesn't do is stand there and look at the big screen and read it. Like he already understands the knowledge there. So the data that's on the screen is really just
To complement,
reinforcing what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yep. So I have a question. I know we've been talking about public speaking for a little bit, and I wanted to see if it was okay to switch things up and ask you, Tim, about, let's make you uncomfortable a little bit, right? Tell us about maybe a moment in your career where you maybe, I don't know, it was a pivotal moment where you needed to enact change, but maybe you didn't know how or what to do.
Yeah, years ago, and the guy's been my business partner forever, and is one of my best friends. Right, like if there anything happens to me, he's got my kids. Right, like it's that close. But when we first met, I 100% read him as a threat to my career. Right, and it was like we struggled for a minute figuring out our working relationship. And then finally one day we just went to lunch and it was like, oh, he doesn't want to do what I do. Even though he's good at it, he's already done it. He sold it. Like he doesn't want to do that. So there's just times where sometimes you just got to have a hard conversation to realize what it is that, where you're tripping up. Right. I'll tell you the other thing too, is that Matt and I were visiting a little bit about this before you got on, is in the industry, it's you go through and then it was my choice to leave PA. It was done strategically and on purpose with them. Right. So it's a great departure between Christian and the company and myself. But you get so built up while you're doing this. Like, Tim, you're a great guy, man. You're going to get scooped up quick. And then 2 weeks go by and 3 weeks go by and a month goes by. And you got to get into your head like, am I really everything that everybody told me I was? Or are they just being nice?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to an event and everybody's happy to see you, or you get a random call one day, be like, hey, can you be in Baltimore to speak at this event on this subject that I love to hear you talk about? And, so there's a lot of times where you can get in your head and more than likely it's just you and the circumstance than it is the way you're being seen publicly.
Well, I think you're hitting on a good point of what is the psychological toll that you can, or trap that you can fall into when a decision like that happens at a company where it's a decision, you're leaving, but then how do you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and move on?
I think it's so I'm in a different position than a lot of people, right? Like I'm financially okay. I'm not worried about paying the bills or putting food on the table, which provides me a blessing, right? So the immediate need for a job wasn't there, right? And then all of a sudden this consulting thing came up and that started doing some things there. But the thing you got to always know is you got to know your value. And what's funny about knowing your value is what's your work ethic? What do you put in? Like this whole thing of, people skimming by, like that's just not the era I was raised in. Like I am a workaholic. I love to work. That is who I am. Right. I'm definitely a father and I'm definitely, this and that, but my work is my thing. And I think knowing your value and understanding that your value does come from who you think you are, but it gets affirmed by the people around you, right? Like we're still humans. If we don't like each other, we won't hang out with each other. So if someone's choosing to be around you with their time, which is precious in and of itself, then that is validating who you are as a person and what you give to the community. So knowing your value as you're going through the process is very important.
Matt, have you ever gone through a scenario like what Tim has gone through recently? I have, not in tech, but
yeah, I think most people in the industry have. When I left the organization that Tim and I came from, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to be doing, and like Tim, it was a scenario of, okay, I know a lot of people in the industry. What do I want to do? Do I want to go do tech work again? Am I actually as good at that as I think I am? Do I have what it takes to go be a public speaker all the time? And it was weird. It was strange. We were talking about it before. It's not being on vacation. It's trying to figure out what you want to do as the next step. But I have a distinct moment that led me down this road. I remember being at an event and watching in the audience some presentation and saying, man, this guy's describing everything we used to do with this particular piece of technology at the place I came with. I should be up there doing this, talking about this. And that one particular presentation is actually what led me going into this role instead of going to be another security program. So yes, there's a moment.
I think the what do you want to do, right? That becomes an immense question. Like I can tell you, even though I don't know, I think so. I left the last place like right before the PAX 8 show, right? So it's been a couple months. But in the process of talking to all these companies, that there's potential employment opportunity there, right? Like in my head, it's like, man, I've been through 2 companies. And I really like doing what I do, and that takes deep pockets, right? The vendor life supporting the channel to grow your company is not a cheap endeavor, right? And it can crush a small company financially, right? And it's like, so in my head, I'm like, maybe I want to go to these big boys that they got really deep pockets, and I just kind of make up my own schedule. And as long as I'm showing ROI on that, I can do that. But then it's like, I just love this startup space so much. And it's like, I love finding these products that are on the cusp, but really have a quality something to bring to our channel, to our environment, to our ecosystem, and helping them. I always say, if you're familiar with the EOS platform, there's visionaries, entrepreneurs, right? And they're, like trapped squirrels, right? They're all over the place. It's, they're not controlled. Most of them aren't really good at running companies because they're just so aloof to what's going on in their brain and what's firing, that's what they're good at. And then there's a person just below them that in EOS they call an implementer, that actually takes all those crazy great ideas and then implements them to actually execute what the entrepreneur wants, right? And that's the position I love, and that's the position I love. I love with the MSPs, and I love with these startups is you got these people at the top of these companies that are just intelligence off the charts, and they're good at what they do. And they're ready for, that hockey stick and growth, but maybe they're very soft-spoken, right? Maybe they do have that fear of people, that they're only in front of people because they have to be, right? So that's when people like myself come in and say, okay, let me evaluate you from a financial and a tech standpoint, see where you're at, and then see if you're ready to sustain that. And are you bringing something quality to our ecosystem? And like, that's why I love the startup world so much, is because you can take somebody's dream and show them how that becomes reality.
What about starting your own startup?
Yeah, I'm not that guy. I mean, I got this consulting company, right? So I created a Third Power Consulting, right? It's 3 pillars. It's basically the MSP, the vendor, and the channel, because the vendor and the channel are two different things to me. And that is like, I'm not out there actively promoting it, right? It's one of those things that if somebody needs help and it's going to cost me more than a few hours of just me giving my time to try to help someone, then it's a way to legally filter the money. But it's not a passion at this point and stage in my life that I just want to go out and do that. Like, I've got an idea, right, that I think would be really powerful in the space, that that there's people out there that kind of do it. I just don't like the way they do it, so to speak, to be as cryptic as I possibly can. But it's just not my jam. Like, I could run a company all day long. I can be the CEO. I can be the president. I could do whatever you want me to do. It's not what I love. And I learned a long time ago that unless I love what I'm doing, I'm just not happy. Like, work. That's the reason why I'm not a workaholic, is because it's not work to me. Like, there's bits and bobs we have to do, right, Matt? I'm sure you like, you're talking, you love being in the tech, you love that, but there's still bits and bobs that we all have in our daily work lives that just have to be done. That's part of work. But overall, knowing what I love to do and what I'm good at is critical to quite honestly my success and the success of the people I represent.
Yeah, you have to be. You have to do something you're passionate about. I suppose I'm blessed and lucky in that I can't imagine someone who wakes up and dreads going to work or hates their job. And you hear about it so often, and I'm thinking, I don't feel like I hate my job. I feel like I wish I had more time in the day.
Well, I think it's important to note too that you're both creators, right? And you have schedules that can be, you're not on like a tight schedule. You're not in back-to-back technician calls or whatever, right? So we're coming at it from kind of maybe a different mindset than other roles that we've had in the past in our careers. But for, other people that may be out there that may not like what they do, they may actually like what they do, but maybe it's the management, right? Or a direct manager that makes it difficult for them to enjoy what they're doing as well. So there's all sorts of variables, right, that go into play when it comes into, am I happy at my job and what I'm doing? But if you're good at it and you like it, and maybe you're in that camp, then, there's a lot of opportunities obviously out there to be able to grow and do what you want to do. And I think that Matt and Tim, your story is a perfect example of that. And I think it's kind of the essence of this whole episode of taking calls at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and really working like crazy shifts. I mean, I'm married to an IT guy, and I remember he did this like disaster recovery like thing, and nothing worked. He was up for like 24 hours straight, and it was horrible. My heart went out to him and like everybody else that had to be on that call. But it happens. And so what are the skill sets you can create for yourself to be able to grow and not have to do that for your whole life, Well,
and it's a thing too, like, we're all sitting here talking about our great lives. Don't get me wrong, but it always hasn't been this way, right? Like that dreading work. So like my last real job is I made roofing shingles. You want to talk about suck? Like I hated that job so much that I'd drink a glass of water when I got up, and on my way to work, I'd have to pull over because the heartburn was so bad.
Oh man.
Right. Like
that's bad.
And in the early days when I was in my engineering career and I was the actual tech, there's long nights sometimes, and that sucks. And it's just knowing where your goal is and what you want to do, and keep, the corporate ladder is a weird thing, because I think sometimes we push people a rung or more above where they're happy. Right. So there's nothing wrong when you get to a rung. If it's everything you want and it's financially taking care of you and it allows you the balance that you like, there's nothing wrong with staying on that rung. Right. But you definitely got to climb yourself out of some muddy situations to get to the point where you can enjoy it. And I know one of the MSPs I rebuilt, right? It was like the tech team, right? It was like, they all, like, you could just walk into that office and feel the disdain every day of what they were doing. So finally, I just sat down with them over the course of some time and was like, what do you love to do? And it just worked out in that place that a lot of them love to do different things. And it was like, okay, great. So Frank, you got this. Sally, you have that. And And over the course of about 3 weeks, the dynamic of the company completely changed, because I literally just had people stop doing what they didn't like to do. Now, that didn't mean they didn't have to jump in every once in a while and help out, but help direct, as a manager, helping direct them into something that makes them happy and they're good at.
Mm-hmm.
That comes through on multiple levels, right? And that's the thing I tell people all the time. You've got to know what you suck at. If you don't know what you suck at, then you're missing 50% of the equation. Because I suck at details. I tell everybody right off the bat, I am big picture. I make decisions. I move forward. You want to know some minute detail of X, Y, or Z? Not that guy. But I've always hired people that are very detail oriented to make up for that shortcoming in my world. And that's how I build my teams. And I think that's why ultimately I've been so successful over the years, is because I build teams that basically fills the gaps of what people don't like doing with people that love to do that. Like you're not going to find me sitting in the background in a project management tool. Have I submitted the headshot? Have I submitted the bio? Have I got the marketing X, Y, and Z stuff done well ahead of time? Like, you're not going to find me doing that. Like, you'll find me working with that person to make sure that we're on track and doing that stuff. But the detail in and of itself, I've known for years that I'm not. That's just not my personality. So,
well, you can't be everything to everybody. That's another hard lesson that we could spend a whole nother hour talking about, because I have fallen into that trap as well, trying to be the people pleaser and trying to do everything. So don't do it out there, folks. Know your limit and make sure that you're not burning yourself out.
So that was my question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Matt. Like, you can't tell me, as technical as you are, that you've not fallen into the I'll take that on. Man, I hate doing this, but somebody's got to do it, so I'll take that on. And next thing you know, you yourself are upset with what you're doing because you have a whole bunch of stuff that you don't like to do that you've just taken on because you're nice.
There have been so many lost nights, weekends, holidays from all of that kind of stuff. It's a real issue, and I historically have not been good at saying, I have all this other stuff I need to focus on. I can't deal with this right now. Next thing you know, I'm taking on the world's problems and have no personal life anymore, and got so burned out I went to the vendor side. It's real. In fact, that was going to be my question to you, Tim. Like, when you love doing a certain aspect of your role, even if it's awesome, even if it's your favorite thing, how do you avoid that? How do you avoid just going straight to burnout from working 24/7 on it and not having any personal life anymore?
Okay, so once again, Tim's a unique cat. So I was raised by a man born in 1903, right? That worked in the mines his entire life. So working is who I am, right? Like, I try to, it's
1903. Hold on.
What?
How old was he when he was raising you?
Oh, he was in his 70s. He was my grandfather.
Okay.
So for me, work is my pleasure. Like what we do today, like, I don't even know how what I do today, I don't even know how you consider that a job, right? Like, I represent a company and there's work to it, but I love people and I love the new tech and I love helping out MSPs, right? So for me, burnout, I know it sounds weird, but it doesn't really exist. I mean, there's some important things to me. I still got a son that's in high school, so football season is important because it's important to him. And there's some times I got to be there, but for the most part, if I'm somewhere fantastic and I've been working, I'll just take a couple of days and enjoy the area that I'm in. And that's pretty much all I need to recharge. Like every once in a while, every 5 years or so, I'll do like a big vacation. But for the most part, I don't do that because I don't see work as this task that I have to do to put food on the table. And I know, like, even to kind of redirect that over to Vicky, like Vicky's position within ConnectWise, there's a lot of moving parts. And there's no way without her team, I would assume, right? I don't know the super details, but I would assume that there's no way without the team that reports to her doing the things that she's set them up for success to do, that she would be able to take all that on herself and do it. It's just, you would burn out.
Yeah,
or at least
actually,
that's my perception.
Well, when we first met, I was managing two different teams, and there was a lot of it felt like it was burnout because there was a misalignment in what they were tasked to do with what the strategy of the organization was, and I think that also led to the burnout. But I'm an individual contributor now at ConnectWise, and I love it, and I loved being a manager too. In fact, I still stay in touch with most of the people that used to work for me because it's an open door policy. I really believe in all of their success and, believe in all of them. And I'm sure you guys have those examples too of people where you're just like, hey, like, I still want to be in your life. I hope you want to be in mine. I'm always here to help you if you need anything.
So I think you hit on something interesting there that probably is not a super popular title or position. What is an individual contributor? Like what is that? And how do you apply to the success of ConnectWise in your position?
Oh yeah. Well, so I don't have anybody reporting to me. So that in my mind is the definition of an individual contributor.
Okay.
Yeah. But I am 100% reliant on every other aspect of the organization to make the ecosystem, messaging, and vision a success.
So, and that's the key. I think that is the key, right? Like in my position, it's very weird because there's three entities that's at my level that makes a success. And that's marketing, right? Because that's awareness. And then there's me that's out in front of people, going to shows, doing that kind of thing. And then that goes into sales. Well, often when those three don't align, it's rough, right? And you don't enjoy it. I got to get on a day with marketing, or I got to talk to the sales guy because he don't like the way I'm doing X, right? But if you look at it from a standpoint of what you were talking about, Vicky, where it takes all of us in that team mentality to really make this successful. That is the key for me. That is the key to success. I don't want to be an I want to be part of a team. Now, am I typically the front of the front facing part of that team? Absolutely. Right. But I can't do what I do without the other segments. And I can go all the way down to like technical support in any company. Like that's what makes us successful is the team in all of our roles.
So Tim, this is something we ask everyone who comes on the show with us. And that is if you could instill one habit into our audience, something that they should start doing, or there's a habit that they should break, that they should stop doing, or both, what would it be?
Well, I've stepped on this landmine a few times. One, always proceed with positive intent, right? Nobody's out to do anything negative. They're really not. You hope they're not, right? But then on top of that, stop with the knee-jerk reactions. Ask some questions, right? If somebody comes to you with a problem, whether it's like this isn't working or this person said something about it, make sure you're asking questions of the entire surrounding before you make a decision based on that. Because a lot of times, especially in my youth, I would get information and I would make a decision, and then I would have to go back because I didn't assume positive intent. I would have to go back and retract my actions because I wasn't inquisitive enough. And in the end, just be kind. Be kind to everybody. You don't know what's going on. So, have some grace and treat people the way you want to be treated.
Well, thanks for joining us, Tim. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in for this episode of IT Nation Wise Up. And if you have topics that you want to hear about, Matt and I want to hear from you. So make sure that you reach out to us at itnationpodcast@connectwise.com. And until then, remember that every day is a chance to learn something new.